Hello, everyone.
Hello, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday and welcome to Sovereign Lovestream. So introduce the topic.
This week, well, first of all, I'm Vanessa and this is Danny. And this week we're talking about sex, finally.
Yes, I've been waiting for this show.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So
you know me, I love to talk about sex.
I know.
It's my love language. So.
It is. It absolutely is. So this week we are going to be discussing physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, and how to create a healthy balance in a relationship, or at least the way in which we've created a healthy balance in our relationship, and perhaps some of the things that need to be discussed or would benefit the couple to be discussed in order to maintain a healthy balance.
Yeah. I've certainly had my share of relationships in the past, and I think there have been times in our relationship where we have not been completely balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even to say that, like, completely balanced, I don't believe necessarily we are completely balanced in this moment, but we're moving towards that. And it's something that we keep in our conscious awareness that we want to be in balance. And so, you know, it's arguable if you're ever really totally in balance. So I guess I should say there have been times in our relationship, and I've had past relationships where it was completely out of balance, where it was glaringly obvious. How about you?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think we all experience that to some degree.
I'm sure.
And I think really what it all stems from is from a lack of communication. I was reading an article before that says that intimacy is one of the things that couples fail to communicate about in the beginning of their relationship, and it's such a detriment to the relationship because we kind of all come into relationships with certain expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody has the same upbringing. Not everyone has the same confidence levels. Not everyone has the same religious ideas. And sex is a huge topic. It's very taboo in certain communities. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, and it's unfortunate that so many couples are not having the conversation, and it goes unspoken in many relationships.
It's hard because it's such like a deep and intimate thing that it takes a lot of vulnerability to be able to share that, you know. Like, even now, we have an amazing relationship, we have an amazing sex life, and there are times that I want to make love and I feel embarrassed to ask you or to say it, or I feel like, oh, she doesn't really seem like she's in the mood, so I'll just let it go, you know. And it's difficult, even for us who have done so much work on a relationship.
I think it always is difficult to a certain degree.
It probably always would be, right?
Yeah. And I think that the more we talk about it, the more we become willing to be vulnerable about it, the easier it'll become.
Yeah, I think that's true. I have certainly had relationships, past relationships that were almost exclusively based on sex, and obviously that's not healthy. I've had relationships that were, you know, somewhat balanced, but I feel like in general, relationships either tend to be like lean heavy to one side, right? It's either a lot about physical connection, or it's more about emotional connection, and the physical intimacy is like the icing on the cake. And I think even that is out of balance. For someone like me, who physical touch is my primary love language, that's how I feel loved, is when I'm being physically loved. It's extremely important, but that physical touch is not just for the sake of getting off, it's for the sake of feeling that emotional connection. But that's not the way you experience connection.
No, for me, it's much harder. I have a difficult time connecting physically if my emotional needs aren't met or don't feel like they're being met. So we've had situations where we are, oh, did we freeze? Oh no.
Can somebody leave a comment if you could still see us? Because it looks like...
It looks like just double
Checking 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it looks like that maybe the camera froze.
Okay, so the audio is good. Let's...
Yeah, it looks like
All right. All right, that's better. I mean, it's not... We had to go to the webcam, but that'll have to be...
All right.
All right, so where were we? Sorry about those technical difficulties. What were we talking about?
We were about my need for emotional connection before physical connection.
Right.
So there have been times where you're out all day at work, you're busy. I'm home, maybe with Xander or just doing house stuff if he's not here. You get home from work and I'm cooking dinner, cleaning up after dinner, kind of just each doing our own thing. Sometimes barely communicating depending on the day or what's going on in our lives. And if we get into bed and you're ready to snuggle up, I have like a sort of wall built up around me.
Because for me, I've missed you all day. So my instinct is we're finally at the end of the day and we have time now. I want to snuggle and I want to be physical.
And I mean, I don't think that's always the case. I think definitely if we have moments where it's clear that there's something off, for me at least, where it seems like something's off. Sometimes it may be that for a few days we've had just the same pattern where we hardly interact or hardly really connect with each other than just the basic, what do you want for dinner? Let's do this. We need to go to the store or whatever it is that we're doing. So if I feel that there is no other like intimacy during the day, then yeah, it's going to be a lot harder for me to connect physically.
And a lot of times it took me a long time to realize that you really need to have that, like, because to me it seems silly. Like, why do we have to talk about something? Why can't I just hold you and kiss you and that you're going to feel my love because that's the way I feel it. So sometimes it felt silly to me. And so I'd be like, this, doesn't make sense. And so then I would take it as a rejection and feel like, oh, she's mad at me about something or whatever. And so then it's almost like the fight would get created accidentally because of those miscommunications.
Yeah.
So then I would feel rejected because she doesn't want to snuggle. And then I would get cranky and maybe snap at her about something else. Right. And that's not what it's about. If I were to just say, I feel like I want to snuggle with you. I missed you today. And, we finally have a minute and you're not snuggling with me. I feel rejected. Like if I had that vulnerability back then to be able to say that, luckily, actually, to be quite honest, there are moments that I still feel that way and I don't say it, but I do say to myself, okay, she's maybe just not in that place. We need to connect a little bit first. And maybe I can make the conscious decision. Let's have a conversation. Babe, how was your day? Were you stressed out? Whatever.
Yeah.
How was your, how was your day today? Let's talk about that. And it may seem silly to a lot of people whose love language is physical touch, but for Vanessa, it's important. And so that's a gift that I'm willing to give her. When I can reframe it instead of taking it personally and saying, this is a rejection of me and turn it around and say, this is something that she needs. Why wouldn't I want to give her something that she needs to make her happy? Especially then, if that's going to make her open to loving me the way I need to be loved.
And I think it requires a certain vulnerability also to be able to communicate those love languages because it took me a long time to even recognize the fact that I needed that emotional connection first. And I felt weird even saying like, oh, I need I would like for you to be a little bit more, I don't know, communicate more with me, to be a little bit more emotionally affectionate. Before I can connect physically. And so what I would do is I felt like I was rejecting you. Like I needed to like push you away without really communicating that. And it does require vulnerability. It is scary.
Mhm.
And I think we've kind of found a balance now where we can say things like, I missed you today. Or like I say things like, I missed you sometimes when I wake up.
That's true.
And sometimes he looks at me like I'm crazy, but it's like, oh, I missed you. We're awake now, and now I get to, you know, snuggle with you, and it's different. I guess we just have different feelings, different ways of interpreting those feelings.
Sure. What Jada is saying is right. When you look at things selfishly, that's me saying you're not willing to snuggle with me, and like that's a very selfish, self-centered view. I want something, you won't give it to me, so now I'm going to put up a wall.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, wait, what is it that's causing her maybe to not be open to me right now, and how can I bridge that gap? That's selfless. How can I meet her needs so then I can get my needs met, rather than just demanding,
or even just meet your needs for the sake of wanting to meet your needs, right? Like there's it's not always like, what am I going to do to get something in return? Right.
No, I don't mean it like in a transactional sense, but just if you're less focused on yourself and more focused on your partner's needs, then naturally your needs are going to get met.
It's just reciprocal, sacred
Right.
reciprocity in that way. And I also think that, you know, it's also taken me a while to recognize that, and then be able to say like, all right, he wants to be physically affectionate. I have these emotional needs. I am feeling I need to get met in this moment. And so then it becomes also part of my responsibility to initiate that conversation, not just to say, well, you know, when is he going to ask me about my day? Or when is he going to when is he going to talk to me about, you know, whatever.
It's an important point, because sometimes it's not always, for me, it's not, if I don't ask her about her day, it's not because I don't care, but sometimes I just don't think about it. I'm just distracted, or, you know, I've worked hard all day and my mind blanks out. And honestly, I just want to lay down and scroll Facebook or play Fortnite for a little while. And I just need that time to decompress a little bit. And I may not think to say, hey, babe, how was your day? So yeah, and I appreciate that when you, instead of getting upset with me and holding a grudge against me, that you just start the conversation yourself.
Yeah. But yeah, it definitely requires, like we were saying before, just lots of vulnerability
and practice. It's not something it took us years to develop the practice to remember these things, because in the moment when you're feeling your feelings, when you're feeling rejected, or when you're feeling lonely, or you miss your partner, those emotions sometimes can be overwhelming, especially for me. I'm a very emotional person. I have big emotions, and I'm not afraid to express them. And sometimes I express them too quickly before I really think about them. And that can also lead to, and has in our relationship led to, problems.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also, I guess, in a way, the practice of mindfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of being aware of what you're feeling in the moment, being aware of how you're communicating it, how you're letting your partner know, rather than, like you said, just blowing up and saying, I'm tired. I've been working all day. I don't want to have a conversation right now. Right. It's a matter of kind of taking a step back. And for me also, it's a matter of saying, well, he's been working all day. Like, I'm not going to wait for you to come home and immediately like start drilling you or asking you for this attention that perhaps right now you just need to relax and decompress. I remember coming home when I was working in the city, and coming home during rush hour traffic, and just being exhausted and not wanting to talk to anybody, I just was like, leave me alone.
And you know what's funny is that there was that time when you were working in Manhattan and I wasn't. I was here in the neighborhood. I have a small business that basically operates in my neighborhood, and she would come home exhausted and cranky from having to deal with that. And I was like, I don't understand what the big deal is. Like I'm doing physical labor. You're like at a desk, right? And I didn't get it. And then a couple of times I went with her, or I would be traveling home with her during rush hour, and seeing the way these people cram themselves onto the train, and I was like, oh yeah, now I get it. This is ridiculous. I can't even imagine having to live this way.
So yeah, sometimes it's a matter of putting yourself in your partner's shoes. For me, kind of being able to communicate at those love languages has been so important to us, because without that information, it doesn't make sense, right? We kind of live in our own world, and this is how I feel things. This is how I react to the things that I'm feeling. So why doesn't he react the same way?
Mm-hmm.
But if he has a different love language, it's obvious that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And another thing about communicating is that I think as men and women, we have such completely different experiences. As a society, women who are openly sexual, who talk about sex, are sometimes viewed as wanting attention, as thirsty, as whorish, or whatever other
thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
Legit.
And so, I mean, I grew up in a very conservative home. My parents are immigrants, and it was like sex was a taboo topic. That's not something that you spoke about. It's not something that was like, why would I never heard my mom talking about sex? And so I kind of learned to just like, you learn to shy away from the topic. I was always very like shy and not willing to talk about it. And one of the first times we had sex, you asked me like, what did you like? And I was like, why are you asking me this? Like, I don't want to talk about it.
I was like, how was it? What did you like? What didn't you like? What can I do? And she was like, stop being weird.
I was like, don't talk to me about that. And there's so many different, backgrounds and cultural norms that make it really difficult for couples to communicate. And unfortunately, it's such a huge part of the relationship. If there's no physical intimacy, it makes a relationship pretty difficult. I mean, unless both of you, your love languages have nothing to do with physical intimacy. But I think ultimately I think it's important to be able to communicate that, to be able to address that from the very beginning.
Jada has a question. In a relationship, is physical attraction still playing a big part? I mean, I would say so. For me, it's extremely important. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, we don't have that issue. But.
No, I think it depends. I think it depends on the relationship. It depends on the couple. For us, one of the struggles that I've had personally was that I have a hormonal imbalance, and over the past, 5 or 6 years, I've gained like 15 pounds. And that has been like a huge game changer for me. It's been, I've had a hard time with it. Danny doesn't seem to have a problem with that. But I definitely feel as though, it could be a game changer. I mean, society feeds us all these ideas of what an attractive person looks like, and it depends on the person. It depends on if someone is really falling into those ideas of what somebody looks like, and can the attraction can get lost. I don't know.
I think another thing I would point out is that, I mean, for us, it's important. But there may be people who are perfectly happy in relationships with little or no physical affection. And if that works for them, then, who are we to judge? So, we can really only speak from our experience. And I think it's very important for us. I think probably for most people, it's important. I feel like studies have been done about children. And you were actually just telling me about this a couple of weeks ago, about children being hugged and the difference between children who are loved physically as children and those who aren't, and their development. Mm-hmm. I would think that those things would carry through probably for most of our lives. So I would guess that it is probably important, but that's not to say that there aren't people that could function and have healthy relationships without physical contact. I mean, if that works. So we don't want to make it sound like we're judging that. Definitely not. We're kind of just really speaking more from our experience. And I think our society has focused a lot on physical attraction, right? For men, it's about physical attraction. According to somebody mentioned social engineering. I think that's kind of the theme. For men, it's about physical attraction. For women, it's about financial stability, right? Marrying someone who's going to provide them financial security. That seems to be like a theme, especially in more conservative circles. And I think then there's this other kind of movement that swung the other way, where it's like, no, physical is not important at all. It's only the emotional content of the relationship that's important. And I think both of those views are out of balance, because I think it needs to be a balance, and balance in whatever way works for you as a couple. There may be women who are really more into the physical than the men. There may be relationships like that out there. And if you balance it, whatever way you balance it, is up to you.
I think there's no one like answer or one like perfect solution for everybody. Right. And I mean, that's why we keep saying this whole live stream has always been just about our experience, what's worked for us, tips and tools that we've found along the way that have helped us to get to a place where we can identify what it is that we want as a couple. Perhaps in another life we would have had different needs, and maybe those needs we would have been able to meet those needs in a different type of relationship. Mm-hmm. So I think really ultimately what we're trying to communicate is that the most important thing is to communicate, to have the difficult conversations, the uncomfortable conversations. There are many people in relationships that are unhappy with their sex life or their emotional life, and they just are completely quiet and accept, like, I married this person, I love this person, I'm not going to ask them to change. And it's not about asking somebody to change, but it's about communicating your needs. I feel like if you're in a relationship where you and your partner are in love with each other, you want to meet each other's needs. Yeah. I enjoy meeting your needs. I'm happy to do that.
And you're very good at it.
And so it's I think it's important. I think that if I know your love language, if I know that you like affection, I mean, in the beginning, it was absolutely that you wanted to cuddle with me. And I was like, I haven't had my emotional fix yet. So I'm not ready for that. And now I'm in a place where like he wants to cuddle and I'm like, okay, I'll cuddle with you. And then I'll start the conversation, or I'll tell him, I'll cuddle with him and say, I just really feel like we've been kind of busy and haven't had time to talk to each other. I feel like we're a little distant. Can we just bring that back?
I was actually just going to say that there have been times that I've then tried to initiate lovemaking and she has responded exactly that way. She wasn't ready yet. And then we can have a conversation and then spend the rest of the night, doing what we do. So, another great comment from Jada. She feels that men are protectors and providers and women are nurturers. I would agree with this, but I would maybe just change it up a little bit to say the masculine and the feminine. So there are going to be same-sex couples where maybe one of them is masculine and is the protector. And I don't think it's necessarily tied to gender. And I know this is going to ruffle feathers. It doesn't have to be tied to gender. I think it's more about the masculine, the dominant energy, right? I'm a masculine dominant energy. Vanessa's a feminine dominant energy, but in other couples, it may not be that way. I think it's important for the sake of inclusivity to, really describe it more as that, because there are going to be same-sex couples where there is, a masculine woman who's going to be more the protector and the provider, and as opposed to the nurturer. So.
All right. What else? Ken's come up easier.
Yeah, I didn't even mean to pop that comment up there, but that's true, especially with Vanessa. And just to show you that there are people out here that believe these things. I mean, here they are right on our feet.
I mean, to each his own. If he would prefer a partner that doesn't speak about those things, I mean, I don't know. I hopefully it would be a partner that has no interest in physical sexual satisfaction.
But honestly, I mean, yes, I'm trying to remain in a space of non-judgment, but at the same time, I feel like this attitude is toxic. And this is the kind of attitude that has caused women to feel like they can't be open, they can't be vulnerable, or else, people are going to call them whores and names just for being honest about their feelings. I feel like there should never be any kind of, one of the things in the truth movement, the liberty movement, is we're anti-censorship. Why would we want to shut down our partners from sharing their feelings with us?
And their needs.
And their needs. Yeah, of course. That makes no sense. If the idea of being against censorship and being for free speech and freedom in general, if we can't be free to express our feelings, especially to our intimate partners, then we're not really free. So Ethelrod, I would take a look at that in your own life. And if you feel like you shouldn't, or your partner shouldn't express certain things, are you really free? That might be something you might want to look at without getting too judgmental.
I agree. Let's see. What was the other thing we were going to talk about?
I would actually bring up something that I think is a big issue, probably, or at least the stereotype is that it's mostly an issue for men. It's something that I've certainly had an issue with in my life, and that's porn. So there have been times in multiple relationships and in my relationship with Vanessa where we were struggling through the communication and we weren't able to bridge the gap, and I felt rejected. And so then I would say, okay, she doesn't want to fill my needs, then I'm going to fill my needs this way, using pornography. And again, I don't want to cast judgment against sex workers, actors in porn, or people that consume porn. If that's something that you're into, that's great. For me and for us and how our relationship has evolved, I would say that it's energy that is taken away from her. This is intimate sexual energy. It's very powerful energy. And it's something that I believe is meant for my partner. And I don't want to expend it, even in masturbation. And maybe it's not so much about the porn as it is about masturbation, or I don't know. I haven't fully formed my views on this maybe yet. But I think I feel like it's energy that I could direct towards you. So instead of saying, fine, she doesn't want to have sex right now, I'm going to go jerk off. Excuse me for the, we're uncensored here. Instead, I could just take that energy and put it into the communication, and then we can make love. And it's going to be such a much more satisfying experience than watching a video.
Yeah. And I think that ultimately what that comes down to is what is the need behind the desire to watch porn, right? If it's just, hey, we enjoy it and that's what we're going to do, or that's what I want to do, or that's what you want to do. It's very different than saying this is a reaction to a specific situation. And if that's the case, we need to look at why we're having that reaction, why we're having this feeling, what is the need behind it. And I think that's not just with porn. I think that's with pretty much any of our behaviors.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it could be something else, it could be diving into video games or doing something else. I mean, there's certainly other things. I think porn, just because it's for men, the sexual, I shouldn't even say that for men, because I think women do have the same strength of sexual desire as men, but that's the way it's portrayed in society. So right there's kind of like a little subconscious thing, right? Where I was like, oh, but men are more sexual, but no, they're really not.
Again, it goes back to the way things are portrayed in society, the way things are, the way women are expected to behave and the way men are expected to behave. And that creates these sort of weird feelings, right? Because as a man, perhaps you could say, well, I'm just more sexual because I'm a man. And so that's understandable. And if she's obviously not going to be as sexual as I am because she's a woman, and therefore it makes sense for me to go watch porn because she's not going to, she's not going to be able to keep up with my needs because I'm just more sexual by default. And if we have the conversation, we would probably we would come to realize that we're both just as equally sexual. We just may not have the perhaps freedom, or that there are these judgments about women speaking about these things. I mean, even doing this episode, I'm like, oh my God, what if my parents see this? um, so there are lots of things, and I'm learning to let go of those fears and that fear of judgment. I'm not offended at all by this guy's comments either. Because everybody has an opinion, and everybody has their own way or their own beliefs about how life is supposed to be lived. And the whole point of this live stream is to help people be empowered and live a sovereign life, live the life that they want to live. And even in relationships, it's super important. We are together, we're a couple, but we're both sovereign beings. We're doing our own work. We have our own childhood traumas that we're working through, and we do that separate and we do it together. And then the love part of our relationship becomes a conscious choice. It's no longer a codependent relationship. There are no attachments.
And we have had moments in our relationship or seasons where we were codependent on each other.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that codependency is unhealthy when you're depending on someone else to fulfill you because you're not taking the time to care for your own emotional self. It puts pressure on them that is unfair. And then it just causes all kinds of, feedback loops and all kinds of weirdness that goes on that just escalates.
Yeah, because it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to navigate life on your own as it is. You grow up, you have all of these things that happen to you as a child, ideas that you pick up that aren't necessarily true. And as you get older, you start realizing that they're not true. And so you're unpacking, you're unlearning. And then if you're with a partner who isn't doing their work, then that puts the burden on you, or it gets to a point where it's hard to live in that type of relationship where you both numb each other out and then you just exist for the sake of existing as a couple. And I think that it makes a lot more sense to work at a relationship consciously, where you're both doing the work, you're helping each other through the work, holding space for each other. There are plenty of time. There are plenty of times where it's your partner is going through something that you can't help them with. You can't fix it for them. There are plenty of times that Danny struggled with situations that I don't have experience with, and I can't help him through it. I can just hold space for him and say, all right, I know you're going through something difficult. I'm here to help you. I'm here to listen to you. And, I can give you advice, but I can't fix it for you. Ultimately, it's your job to fix it. And the fact that we have that type of relationship where at times we can hold each other, we can work through the issues that we're working through, either with each other or just holding space for each other. And I think that makes the relationship a lot more, a lot stronger, in my opinion.
A lot more healthy and a lot more balanced. And that's something that I struggled with, was thinking I could fix things for you.
Yeah.
And so instead of just holding you and letting you vent your emotions about your frustration about coming home in rush hour traffic, I would just be like, well, just don't let it bother you, or take the next train, or let's find you another job so you don't have to go to the city. Like, I wanted to fix the issue instead of just allowing her to unload that, to vent those emotions to me, and just empathizing and, giving her love. And there's that famous scene in White Men Can't Jump where Rosie Perez asks Woody Harrelson for a glass of water, and he gets up and he gets the glass of water, and she's like, "No, stupid." She's like, what did she say? She says, "I want you to tell me that you know what it's like to be thirsty. It's not about, I can go get the glass of water myself. I want you to just empathize with the fact that you understand what it's like to be thirsty." And that's a pretty funny scene that maybe you're too young to remember that. Do you not know that?
No, I don't.
Another movie she hasn't seen.
I haven't seen it. Sorry. But yeah, I think absolutely it's a matter of empathizing. I think the fact that we can ultimately it boils down to communication, being able to express these things, creating the space to express these things, and creating a space where we're not jumping to be defensive about our needs. Sometimes we want to express something. We want to, for example, if I were to say to Danny, I just need you to be emotionally supportive right now, or I need some emotional connection, and he reacted in just a nasty way of like, what, you're insane, you don't need that, like that's you're asking for too much. And maybe in the beginning you did do that, but that it doesn't create a space for me to then be open, for then say, what did you think, or what did you like? Where would that space be if when I tell you my needs, you shut me down, right? And so now that we are able to communicate our needs with each other, that we are able to communicate our desires, our goals, our, just anything with each other, it creates a healthier relationship, because now we can talk about these things, right? I do feel comfortable expressing pretty much anything to you, any desires, any likes or dislikes, because now we're not in a reactive space.
And now, guys, let's think about this. If your partner feels loved, respected, heard, fulfilled by the fact that you can empathize with her feelings, how much more receptive will she be in bed? And how much more reactive will she be to you? Right? Opening this communication makes the physical aspects so much more fulfilling. I mean, the sex is amazing. I mean, we can brag about it because we worked hard to get here. No, but seriously, it's not that there's anything special about us, or it's not even just chemistry. And I think there is chemistry. I think that's a thing, right? Like when we met, things were good, Yeah. But nothing compared to what they are now. Nothing. You can't even compare it.
Yeah. And I think the more emotional work that you do, the more emotional intimacy you achieve, the easier it is to achieve that physical intimacy that is much more exciting and explosive and meaningful. Mm-hmm. And I think we have this idea of romantic movies, and it's cute and it's nice. And I'm sure that exists. I'm sure there are people that can coast through a relationship in a nice way, have an easy relationship and an easy life and enjoy sex, and that's all great. We've come from a place where we enjoyed sex and then went through all of these like trials and tribulations and worked through so many things where we're a lot more intimate with each other, and not just physically.
Yeah.
We know each other on a deeper level. And when you know someone on such a deep level, it's easier to connect physically.
Yeah.
And that connection is more meaningful. It's more exciting. There's like an electricity to it.
And we've always had consistently, even through the hard times, we've always had good sex. It's never been. So that chemistry, that baseline of chemistry has always been there. So, for someone to say, well, I don't have to worry about that because the sex is good, but it can get better. It can get better. It can go cosmic. I mean, when your hearts, your minds, everything in your bodies are in sync, it just.
And I think there's also the fact that it creates a balance in the relationship. And I'm sure there are people that have fantastic sex, but when it comes to their personal lives, to their emotional relationship, that's struggling too. Mm-hmm. And that's where the balance comes in. We had great sex in the beginning, but our emotional relationship wasn't in a healthy place at all. Yeah. And I think that the work needs to be done on both sides of the emotional and the physical mm-hmm. side of the relationship. I think another thing to take into consideration is that there are so many women on birth control, and birth control has such crazy effects on the hormones, and it's something that again isn't always talked about. And within our relationship, hormones has played a huge part. I've been very open about my hormonal issues, and at times that's created problems in myself, in my own self-esteem, in how I feel, my libido, my sex drive. And I've had to communicate that, things aren't going that great. My hormones are all out of control and I am not in the mood. Leave me alone. And sometimes that's hard to communicate. It's, Danny has taken a huge interest in my physical health as well. And I think that played a huge part in, we've been trying to conceive for a few years, but in the beginning, Danny's take on that was, yeah, I'd be willing to have a baby with you. And that changed. That had to shift to a place where he's excited about us bringing a baby into the world. And that changes the dynamic of our relationship. It changes the intimacy of our relationship. It changes the intention with which we're engaging sexually. And I think that's all super important. And it can't happen unless we're willing to have the difficult conversations. And unless he's willing to understand that there are moments where I'm just not feeling okay. And it's not something that I'm necessarily doing wrong. It's just my body is having a particular reaction. And sometimes that happens.
For me, I was in a much more self-centered place when I was like, yeah, if we have a kid, we have a kid. I would, of course, I'd be happy to have a kid with you. But it wasn't something that I was like, yes, I want to have a baby. Because I was in a selfish place. I wanted to travel. I want to do these things. And I felt like, if we have a kid, that's going to put a damper on that kind of stuff. And now that I've done so much work and I understand it's not all about me. Believe it or not, it's not. I mean, and yeah, I am. And not just for the fact that she really wants children and I want to give it to her because that's what she wants. But now the idea of us coming together and creating new life together is a beautiful idea. It's something that I desire too. So that really has shifted and changed. And I think that has opened her up as well for me to be able to express that to her sincerely, not just say it because I know that's what she wants to hear. I think has really made you a lot more willing to be vulnerable with me. Mm-hmm. Right. Because if you're like, I want to have kids, she wants to have 5 kids. And I was like, I don't know about that. At this point, it's so funny. I was just having this conversation with somebody and I was telling them that you wanted 5 kids. And I was like, I'd be fine with that at this point, But kind of lost my train of thought there.
But yeah.
Oh, if you have a strong desire to have children and I'm just like, yeah, okay, we could have kids or we could not, whatever. You're maybe not going to feel as open to share other things with me or to be as vulnerable because you're going to feel like that's kind of, I understand how you would feel hurt for me to say to me, I want to have kids. I want to have 5 kids with you. And I'm just like, yeah, I guess, whatever, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
Like I can understand why that would feel hurtful. And so that would make you kind of close up and not want to be as vulnerable. I wanted to mention these 2 books. It's really one book in general, especially that have really been very powerful in our lives. Getting the Love You Want, actually both books really, because nonviolent communication is like kind of the foundation. And then Getting the Love You Want takes nonviolent communication and applies it specifically to romantic relationships. And we have mentioned this book several times over the course of the podcast so far. And we really can't stress enough how amazing this book is, that it really just takes very simple, they have exercises where they break down very simple disagreements or conflicts in relationships and help you get to the bottom of what the root cause of those conflicts are so that you can figure them out and no longer let them trigger you. Like, for instance, me getting into bed with her at the end of the day, not having said 2 words and just wanting to have sex, and then feeling rejected when she's not into it. Right now, I can understand. I can now, using the techniques in the book, I can look at it, I can observe and say, okay, this isn't an insult towards me. She's not attacking me. She's not rejecting me. She's just not in the mood because something's going on with her. Babe, what is it? Right? And then now we avoid the conflict instead of me being like, why don't you want to have sex?
Another great book is also Transformation Through Intimacy by Dr. Robert Augustus Masters. It's an excellent book. It talks about a lot of basically a lot of relationship issues, how to communicate, the difference between codependent and independent relationships. There's lots of information about how some of us sexualize our childhood traumas and how to overcome that.
That was huge for me. That there was a lot of growth when I read that part and realized that in a lot of my past relationships, and even in the beginning of our relationship, I was sexualizing some of my childhood traumas, feeling like my mother wasn't as affectionate towards me, and so I needed the affection of women, and I sought that through sex. And so there was a time where I was just having a lot of casual sex, and it was because I felt unloved. I felt unfulfilled inside because I felt like my mother wasn't affectionate enough. And since then, I've been able to kind of work through those issues with my mom. And so now I no longer have that desire. Like when I'm out in the world, I don't need to flirt with women to see if they'll flirt back so that I can feel validated or, validated, or just to feel like that my self-esteem is based on how many women want me or would be willing to sleep with me. Right. And I can be vulnerable and share that with the audience. And, that's something that I really struggled with. And that book, Transformation Through Intimacy, really helped me to see that and get past it.
Yeah, I think a lot of us don't realize that some of our sexual desires or needs or our beliefs about sexuality are rooted in childhood traumas, or not necessarily traumas. There are situations where we wouldn't even see them as traumatic, but they play a major role. Sometimes little things, just as not having personal autonomy as a child, your parents telling you have to allow such and such person to hug you and kiss you, you have to allow this or you have to allow that. It starts creating this idea that you're not in charge of your own body, that you don't have a right to say no to somebody because, they're more important or they're higher ranking or whatever the case is. And
wow.
That's a huge trauma, and it's something that I've become aware of, and I'm like very careful when it comes to children, like of asking, is it okay, asking for permission to allow kids to know that they have a right to say no. If I'm not comfortable with you hugging me, there's no reason why I should allow that or accept that. And some of these things are so tiny that we don't even recognize them. I know there are plenty of things in my childhood that I don't remember, but I know have created certain ideas or expectations in my adult life. And it's a matter of kind of working through all of these ideas, clearing them out, determining which ones are legitimate and which ones are just ideas that we formulated through childhood experiences, that maybe a parent was just wrong in that moment or wasn't exactly paying attention to you and dismissed a valid concern. And a lot of our work really as adults is reparenting ourselves, learning to clear some of those things where our parents may have messed up, because our parents aren't perfect. The same way we're not perfect as parents, we're going to make mistakes. It's important to grow up and to start recognizing these coping mechanisms. And as we recognize them and work through them and clear them, that provides for a more honest relationship. We're more vulnerable with each other because we don't require that validation. If I say something to you and you don't like it, it's no longer a situation where I'm like, all right, well, now I can't say anything to him. Now I know, well, he wasn't ready to hear it. I know what I'm saying. I believe what I'm saying because I have that confidence now, or that reparenting technique that allows me to validate myself, then if he's not ready to hear it, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. And because the truth is, we're not perfect 100% of the time. We're not in the moment, in the now 100% of the time. We're distracted sometimes. We're not always fully present, and we may make dismissive remarks to each other. But if we're in a place of honesty, of vulnerability, we can come back from that in a much quicker way. And ultimately, all of that, I mean, it's like we kind of went all over the place with this whole conversation, but it does all tie down to sex, because the more you become confident in yourself, the more you're able to reparent yourself, the more you're able to be vulnerable with your partner, the greater the intimacy.
Absolutely. It's all connected. I mean, it is just like it's a web, and it's all interconnected, and you can't separate any of the parts. You can't separate emotion from mental, from physical. It's all connected. We are holistic beings. And so it's part of holistic medicine, because even your emotions, right? It's all part of it. And so if you want to be holistically healthy, and that includes your relationships, especially the close family relationships, partners, your children are included in that. For the family to function healthy, you need to look at all these things holistically and make sure that everybody's getting their emotional needs met, and physical needs met, and that it's a balance.
Yeah.
All right.
Yay. Is there anything else we have?
I don't know. Whew. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
If anybody has any questions, pop them up.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I had one more thing I was going to discuss, but I forgot.
I'm just going to scroll through while you're thinking, see if we have any comments worth putting up. There's a lot of...
There's some people who unfortunately don't believe in love, and that's sad. I feel like ultimately love is the essence of life, and that's all there is. I think it's going back to...
Here we go. This is a great... Thank you, Lewis. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. It's so funny. I just saw that quote somewhere, and I'm not sure where, probably on Instagram or something, but yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's about. If I look inside myself, Vanessa looks inside herself, we figure out ourselves, then we can come together, have a healthy relationship. We can parent our children in a more healthy fashion. It's 100%. It's about self-reflection.
Yeah, and I think one of the major issues with so many relationships today is that we're looking for our partner to fulfill our needs. And that's never going to happen until you're ready to do the internal work. Yeah. Nobody is going to fulfill your needs. Nobody's coming to save you. And nobody is going to fix everything for you. As much as I love you, I can't fix everything. Yeah. And as much as Danny loves me, he can't fix everything either. And a lot of times when... I think one of the biggest realizations in our relationship was that we can't just fix each other or necessarily be the happiness for each other. We can do the healing work ourselves, find the love within ourselves, and then come together that way. Come together as whole human beings, having, deciding to have this experience together. And that's exactly what we're doing in this place. We're both healing together.
And it's freeing, because now there's not, like we were talking about before, there's not that pressure of me projecting the feeling that my mom wasn't affectionate enough, projecting it onto Vanessa and expecting her to take my mom's place and be affectionate when she wasn't. And basically I revert back to infant Danny demanding all of your physical affection. Yeah. And it doesn't work. And that creates codependency. And Lewis is clarifying or mentioning that this is a Carl Jung quote.
Yes. Yeah, and I think ultimately when we come to that realization that all of it is inside of us, all of it can only come from within. That's the only time that we'll be able to be honest and vulnerable, right? It's not that you're hurting me. It's not that anybody else is hurting me. Nobody else has control over me except for myself. And once we're able to get past that threshold, then the real work begins. That's when we get down to the nitty gritty and we're like looking at, you start to recognize how the tiniest defense mechanism is like, okay, how old am I right now? Why am I having this reaction? There's no need for this. And that's, it's like you said, it's very freeing, but it also creates a situation where we can put down those walls. We can connect with each other in a way that doesn't require defense mechanisms. I don't need to protect myself from you anymore, and you don't need to protect yourself from me. And that just opens up a whole other world for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate the comments and the questions. Thank you. We appreciate you spending this time with us and listening to what we have to say. We hope that some of it has some value. We don't claim to be experts. We're just sharing our experiences and how we are healing ourselves and our relationships.
Yeah. And opening up the conversation so that we can have more of these conversations. We can talk about these issues, these situations. We can help each other out as a community. We're ultimately all trying to figure this out together, and sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's hard to know what exactly it is that we're doing. Once we can throw this information out there, perhaps other people are willing to pick up the conversation and keep it going. Perhaps other people want to be vulnerable, and that helps us all kind of open up a little bit. The subject no longer becomes as taboo as, we think we live in a very modern society. But I mean, we still have comments here, people saying that women shouldn't be talking about sex and that it's disgusting. So clearly there is still some taboo there. And
there's work to be done, folks.
There's work to be done all around, and we're glad that we get to be part of the conversation, and hope that you guys will leave us some more comments and questions. And
if you have any topic suggestions, something you'd like to see us cover, talk about, let us know. If you want to be a guest on the show, let us know. If you have something you feel like you want to contribute to the conversation, comment on social media, message us. Here is our social media, by the way. First, I want to promote Float and Minds.com. These are two privacy-centric social media networks. As I'm sure you already know, YouTube and Facebook and all the big tech companies are openly saying they're going to censor certain content. So and we all know that they sell our information, they data mine and then sell our information. So if you want privacy-centric and censorship-free social media platforms, check out float.app. and minds.com. We are on both of those. And of course, we're also on all the big tech company social medias, big social, we call it. So follow us there, and you'll never miss an update. And you can get in contact with us on all those platforms. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye. See you next week.
Take care.